America, right now, has the strongest, most durable economy in the world. We're in the middle of the longest streak of private sector job creation in history. More than 14 million new jobs, the strongest 2 years of job growth since the 1990s, an unemployment rate cut in half. Our auto industry just had its best year ever. That's just part of a manufacturing surge that's created nearly 900,000 new jobs in the past 6 years. And we've done all this while cutting our deficits by almost 3/4. Anyone claiming that America's economy is in decline is peddling fiction.
Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon podcast. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including fish antibiotics, long-term storage food, and water filters. Use coupon code PrepperRecon for 5% off your order at CampingSurvival.com. Today's guest is Michael Snyder from the Economic Collapse blog. Michael, welcome back to the show.
It's really great to be back with you. Thank you for having me on again.
Absolutely. You're kind of the man of the hour because all the stuff you've been writing about, all the stuff you've been talking about for years, it's all really just, it's boiling over right now is what it's doing. And I don't know how we're going to cover everything. Usually I try to, talk a few minutes with the guests before the show, but, I knew we had to just get right into this because it's more than I think we're even going to be able to cover. And I don't know where to start, but I guess we'll start with Germany. They recently announced that they'll be instituting cash controls, restricting cash transactions over 5,000 euros. Like the surveillance state, this move's being done, at least partially, in the name of safety to prevent terrorism. Initiating capital controls to combat terrorism in a country that's imported millions of military-age men via the supposed Syrian refugee program. Do you detect any inconsistencies with that statement?
Oh, without a doubt. If Germany was really worried about terrorism, they wouldn't have let, 1 million refugees, more than 1 million, come in 2015 alone, and they're creating havoc in communities all over the country. Women are afraid to just walk into town or to walk home at night because things have gotten just completely and totally out of control. I mean, in many communities, just the whole communities are just fraying and going crazy. But, this move by Germany, it's created kind of an uproar because the Germans are kind of upset about this, but we've already seen stricter controls implemented in France, in Italy, and in Spain, other major European nations where you can only go up to, and the limits are different in different countries. Some it's 2,500 euros, some it's just 1,000 euros, and you can spend cash in a transaction up to that amount, but anything above that amount is banned. And so we're starting to see this happen all over Europe. But then you look in Northern Europe, you look up in Sweden and Norway and Denmark. In Denmark, the government there has a stated goal of eradicating cash, that's their phrase, not mine, by the year 2030, which is quite disturbing. In Sweden and Denmark, in Norway, the largest bank in Norway recently came out and said, hey, we think the entire country should go cashless. They've already gone that direction quite a bit. But the biggest bank in Norway says, we just want to get rid of cash altogether. And typically banks don't like cash because they got to have tellers to give it out, to take it in. They got to have ATM machines, and then of course banks want us all swiping our debit cards or credit cards because then they get fees and they get interest on our credit cards, all that. So they make more money when we all go cashless. So that's what they want. And then governments, of course, like a cashless system too because it allows them to kind of bring in their big brother police state control grid, watching and tracking and monitoring everything we do, everywhere we go, everything we spend money on. So banks like a cashless system, governments like a cashless system. But then I mentioned Sweden. In Sweden, now very, very little is actually done in cash. In fact, many large banks in Sweden, at many bank branches, they will not give you cash. They will not take cash any longer. ATM machines have been pulled out by the thousands in Sweden. And even if you go to church and you're used to tossing money in the offering plate, well, in Sweden now, a lot of churches, almost all the giving's done electronically through a cashless system. So, and in Sweden, this has been done willingly. In fact, the government even hands out readers to the homeless people on the street that are selling their little newspapers or whatever, so they can collect money, digitally, so they don't have to deal with cash. So, up there in Scandinavia, this is very, very advanced, but this is happening all over the world. Even in India, there's a program. The government's trying to encourage people to go away from cash and toward using debit cards and credit cards. So even in a poor country like India, there is a move and a push in this direction. Now, it's not going to suddenly happen to the entire world overnight, but like you said, this move in Germany, it's just another step. We're going to see step after step after step all over the world toward a cashless society.
Do you expect that those steps, that step after step, do you think that's going to be coming at a rapid pace now that we're starting to talk about negative interest rates? Because if people have cash and they have that option to take their cash out and just go stick it in the mattress, won't a lot of people do that rather than pay the bank to actually keep their cash for them via a negative interest rate?
Yeah, and that's the big problem because central banks all over the world, we just saw Japan do it, and in Europe they're doing it. They're starting to impose negative interest rates, and so the banks, are being hurt by this, and basically it's penalizing banks if they want to stash their money, at the central bank. And so, a way that the banks could pass this on to consumers is by applying negative interest rates to a checking account or even a savings account, which is so crazy. But, in which it would basically be a fee or a penalty every month for having your money in the bank. You got to give a little bit of money to the bank. And so, of course, if that happened, people would start pulling their money out of the banks like crazy. And so that's why banks have been hesitant to do that. And so it's really kind of squeezing the banks. And so the banks are saying, hey, if we're going to have these negative interest rates, we really need to go to a cashless system. So people are forced to participate in the system, forced to have their money in the banks because, just like you said, people would pull their money out, put it in their mattresses, put it in their safes, whatever. And so, with negative interest rates without a cashless system, doesn't really work too well for the banks. But, we're moving into this period of great financial crisis, economic crisis that's already started. So I expect this transition to accelerate because it's been during times of chaos that the elite move forward, that the biggest changes are made, the biggest transitions happen. So I would expect this transition to a cashless society to really pick up the pace over the next few years.
And one of the solutions that Deutsche Bank has proposed is putting a chip in large denomination bills, and it would essentially they would charge people a carry tax for keeping money outside of the bank that would offset what they're not paying in the negative interest rate. But don't we already have a carry tax when we think about monetary creation by the Fed or other central bankers when they're devaluing your currency by printing more? Won't that be a double carry tax if they do institute something like that?
Oh, without a doubt. That our money is constantly being devalued, and now there's this kind of race to the bottom all over the world where, global central banks, they've been, let me just give you this number. Since March 2008, interest rates have been cut 637 times around the world, and central banks have purchased $12.3 trillion worth of assets. So that's essentially $12.3 trillion worth of money creation all over the world. I mean, this unprecedented intervention we've seen all over the world, devaluing currencies all over the planet. And, the U.S. dollar, at least here recently, has risen in value over the past year or so as other countries have devalued their currencies faster than we did. And like you look at what's happening in Canada, their dollar has absolutely just crashed horribly. And, this is happening all over the world. We're losing purchasing power. And so, but they always want to find ways to tax us more, to get more out of us. And if we have to use, the banks have to use their system, we're kind of at their mercy.
And I have to give a little disclaimer before the next question, because I'm going to save a whole lot of people writing a whole lot of emails every time I touch this subject. And I think it's why pastors often just stay away from it, is because they don't want the emails. But I've studied Revelation over and over, and I could probably argue either side of a pre-trib, mid-trib debate. I'm what they call a pan-trib. I figure it'll all pan out when Jesus gets here. But I think most Christians are having trouble looking at a world moving toward a cashless society, and not at least considering how similar this sounds to the Mark of the Beast system. But if that's the case, shouldn't have we already been out of here?
Well, there's certainly a wide variety of perspectives on exactly when the tribulation will begin. I don't believe that the tribulation has begun personally, or that it's actually going to begin this year or next year, or even the year after that. But I believe we're heading into a time of unprecedented chaos, which will set the stage for those things. But yeah, the Book of Revelation talks about a cashless system, and that nobody will be and it talks about how everyone will be forced to take the mark of the beast, and they won't be able to buy or sell without it. And this move to a cashless system kind of sets the stage for that, because if everyone's got to participate in a cashless system, that means everyone's got to have their money in the bank. And so that the government could come in and basically be the gatekeeper and say, okay, if you want a bank account, if you want to participate in the system, you've got to have this kind of identification, or you've got to, do such and such. They can set conditions for participation in the system. And then, but everyone has to participate in the system, or else you can't get a job, you can't have a bank account, you can't buy, you can't sell, you can't get a mortgage, you can't get an auto loan. Basically, you can't live a normal life in society. And so, we all kind of, those of us that are Christians, believers, can kind of see where this is heading. And so it's kind of ominous. Now, in terms of, this is an area I'm actually going to be moving more into. Most people know me for my work on the Economic Collapse blog and so forth. But sometime during this next month, approximately, probably sometime in March, a brand new book for me is coming out, and I'm not quite ready to release the title yet, but it's all about Bible prophecy, the last days, the rapture, the times that I believe we're moving into, because I do believe we're living in the last days. And so this transition to a cashless system is just one element of all of this. But, I would encourage people to get ready, because right now, of course, the dominant view out there, and that's being taught in churches all over America, and it wasn't the dominant view throughout church history, but the dominant view in America in evangelical Christianity today is that, we don't have anything to be worried about, because things are, because before anything really bad happens, we're going to be pulled out of here in a pre-tribulation rapture. Now, in my book, I show that this is not at all what the Bible actually says. And I have 37 chapters in the book. My goal is for it to be the clearest and most comprehensive work on this that's out there in terms of what the Bible actually says about all of this. My goal is to really help people understand. But because people think, we're going to be pulled out of here before anything really bad happens, most Christians are not preparing. So when things get really bad, they're not going to have any food or supplies for them or their families. Most Christians are giving no thought, and churches are not preparing Christians at all for the persecution that's coming, that's already rising all over the world. So when this great persecution comes, people are going to be absolutely blindsided by it. And then most people aren't even thinking about the literally billions of lost souls that are out there, the great harvest of souls that I believe is coming in these last days in the midst of all the chaos and darkness, and all the amazing things that God is about to do, the great move of God that I believe is coming, because they think, that's for someone else, because I'm about to be pulled out of here. So this is something I'm going to really make a point of emphasis on, and this book I expect to make a big splash, and it's going to upset some people, because it's going to upset some theological apple carts, but this is something that I'm moving into now.
Well, that's fantastic, and you definitely have an open invitation to come back on the show when you're ready to when that's ready to come out, and tell us about it. Tell us about the release date and all of that. So that's very exciting. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. The dollar's lost over 90% of its purchasing power since 1971. Silver, on the other hand, has proven to be a very stable form of wealth preservation over the years. And where do you buy silver? Silver.com, of course. Silver.com offers fantastic prices on gold and silver. Check out Silver.com today.
In 7 Cows, Ugly and Gaunt, Book 1, Behold Darkness and Sorrow, Daniel Walker begins having prophetic dreams. Through one of his dreams, Daniel learns of an imminent threat of an electromagnetic pulse attack which will wipe out America's electric grid, sending the country into a technological dark age. If they want to live, Daniel and his friends must focus on faith, wits, and preparation to be ready before the lights go out. Buy your copy of 7 Cows, Ugly and Gaunt, Book 1, Behold Darkness and Sorrow, by best-selling author Mark Goodwin, in paperback, Kindle, or audio edition from Amazon.com today.
Now, you obviously write a lot about the economic collapse on your blog. Do you think that an economic collapse, is that a necessary event to get the globe to go along with a new financial order? In other words, do you think this is something that could be a planned event, or do you think that that it's just something that's happening inevitably as a consequence of poor decisions?
Well, there's certainly a lot of debate about that. Now, my perspective is that the elite do like to create order out of chaos, and a lot of times a problem will come along, and a lot of times the elite played a role in creating the problem, and then there's a reaction, and the general public says, we need solutions, someone fix this, and then the solutions that the elite bring in are the solutions that had in mind originally, and they almost always involve more globalization, more centralization, more money and power in their hands. And so we've seen in past moments of crisis when things move much more rapidly than during normal times, because during normal times people aren't ready to embrace emergency measures, crazy things. But when people are hurting, when they're out of work, when things seem to be falling, when markets are crashing, people are ready to accept things that they wouldn't accept during normal times. So I think that it's very likely that the elites are, if they're not causing the current crisis or playing a role in moving things in that direction, that they'll certainly embrace the crisis that's already unfolding, and that I believe is going to continue to get much, much worse, and that they're going to use it to advance their goals and agenda.
And whether it's a planned event or whether it's a conspiracy or whether it's buffoonery, it seems to me that the system is coming unglued, and all the central banksters seem to know it now. Citibank, they recently said that the global economy is in a death spiral. RBS, they said sell everything. Deutsche Bank said prepare for the perfect economic storm. UBS is calling for a 30% bear market and $3,300 gold. But I guess all of these guys are just kind of, they're known for being fear-mongering perma-bears, aren't they?
It's really remarkable to see these elite banks, some of the biggest banks in the entire world, make statements like this. That statements that sound like they came from the economic collapse blog. But no, these are the biggest banks, respected banks, and they're saying sell everything, bear market. And of course, global stocks have already entered a bear market. That that means that close to 20% of all global stock market wealth is already gone. We've only got 4/5 left. At one point last week, close to $17 trillion of global stock market wealth had already been completely wiped out. Now over the past few days, there's been, some bouncing back, and during a crisis, we see big ups and big downs, and there's waves of momentum. But, we've seen since the middle of last year, over $16 trillion of global stock market wealth wiped out. We haven't seen anything like this since the last financial crisis in 2008. We've seen banking stocks, Deutsche Bank over in Germany, the biggest bank in Switzerland, almost virtually all the big banks in Italy just crashing hard. And U.S. bank stocks are starting to fall because, people are concerned about all these energy loans that are going bad, as we've seen the price of oil crash, somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% since over the last 18 months. And energy companies are going out of business. Dozens of them in the United States alone have filed for bankruptcy since the beginning of last year. And then, of course, we're seeing global trade all over the world collapse. The Baltic Dry Index recently fell below 300 for the first time ever. I didn't even know it could go that low. It's crazy. We just got new export numbers out of China. Chinese exports fell 11.2% year over year in January, and Chinese imports declined by 18.8% year over year in January. So China, which is the main hub of global trade, they account for more global trade than anyone, even the United States. Global trade is just collapsing. And the Chinese economy, China has been leading the growth in global trade. Now they're leading the implosion. In fact, Chinese imports have now fallen for 15 months in a row. It's just crazy. And then if it just came out and it was reported by Bloomberg the other day that global trade has fallen so dramatically that now it is cheaper to rent a 1,100-foot merchant vessel, the kind that go across the oceans, than it is to rent a Ferrari. That's how much global trade is just imploding.
And perhaps more awe-inspiring than the recent stock market plunges are the subsequent rebounds. Japan's a great example. The Nikkei, they took a 4% beatdown on February 12th, only to rebound 7% on the 15th. I mean, a strong bull market might do well to make 7% in a year. And they had a 7% rebound in one day. The Dow, I don't think their swings have been quite that severe, but it's nothing to see the Dow down 400 plus points and then have a late day turnaround where it might jump 200 or 300 points in the final hour of trading. Back in August, of course, it was down over 1,000 points and rebounded 400 points intraday. Is that normal market activity? Who thinks the market's crashing? So it seems like a good time to buy. Do we have suicidal traders taking that bet? Is it robots like R2-D2, or is this the plunge protection team?
Well, it's insanity because as a general principle, when markets are calm, when the waters are calm, markets tend to go up because investors like when things are predictable and normal and stable. So when there's low volatility, that's a good sign. When there's lots of volatility, that's a really bad news. You just go back to 2008, and people remember the great stock market crash, but actually the two greatest increases a single day in all of U.S. history were right in the middle of that crash. So we had huge days that were down, being 777 points, but there were 2 days where increases were actually more than 777 points right in the middle of the crash, because that's what we get in these market crashes. We get wild swings up, wild swings down, tremendous swings of momentum. So huge down days are a red flag, but so are huge up days. And so, yeah, just as you mentioned, we had seen a 918-point crash in Japan, and then just a few days later there was a 760-point crash in Japan, and then just now we saw a day where there was an increase of over 1,000 points. So these wild swings up and wild swings down are exactly what we would expect to see in the midst of a financial crisis. And of course, even with that increase of more than 1,000 points on a single day, Japan is still way, way, way down from where they were. So, things are still. And then last night, I believe Japan fell back. It started going back down again. I could probably pull up the number real quick here. Yeah, these wild swings are exactly what we'd expect to see. And, of course, it's not just Japan. We've been seeing these wild swings all over the world. where the big ups and big downs. So, yeah, I don't want people to get fooled. If people see a day where, oh, wow, the Dow went up 500 points, the crisis is over, no, that's a red flag too. And so, we started seeing this volatility back in last August, mid-2015. Things started to get crazy, tremendous volatility, and, we saw some big crashes, but then we saw a rebound. People thought, oh, crisis is over. No. Everything was still screaming that the crisis was still on, and now it's accelerated here in January and February. And, you just look at, the price of oil, you look at junk bonds, you look at everything else. Everything's playing out exactly how we would expect if a financial crisis was unfolding. And now, and we're going to continue to see big ups and big downs unless there's some kind of major, like, black swan event, which, I don't know if you want to get into this, but we could literally be looking at the start of World War III in the Middle East, where if Saudi Arabia and Turkey are thinking about invading Syria, if that happens, we could just see just down for the markets because of a major war starting. But absent of black swan events, we'll probably continue to see big ups and big downs and big momentum swings, but as this crisis unfolds.
That's the end of the first half of my interview with Michael Snyder of the Economic Collapse blog. Tune in next week for the rest of the show.
Get prepared before disaster strikes. PrepperRecon.com offers MOLLE-compatible individual first aid kits for your home, auto, or bug-out bag. These kits have everything you need to address a traumatic injury, including an Israeli battle dressing, quick clot, EMT shears, suture kit, steri-strips, tourniquet, tough strip bandages, and so much more. Kits are available in OD Green, Coyote, Black, and ACU. $99 includes shipping. Go to PrepperRecon.com and click the Store tab at the top of the home page. Order today before it's too late.